We've learned that a lot more people are connect to the soil and the dirt more than you think. It's passive and gentle, and your body does what it would do in nature if nature were optimized to have you break down. Terramation is the gentle transformation of human remains into compost. Instead of ashes with a cremation, the family is returned beautiful, life-giving compost, and you really see that transfer of vitality take place. You would never know that those were the remains of something that was a living being once.
People are looking for options. They are looking for ways to memorialize the life that they've lived. Welcome to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. If you ever asked, how do I protect myself and those I love if something unexpected happened to me? You're in the right place. I'm your host, Nikki Weiss, and together we'll explore how to protect yourself in a world where both your physical and digital legacy leave a lasting impact. And welcome back to another episode of the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. And I am super excited here to introduce to you Bree. Now, Bree, I have found you years ago on TikTok because you are a TikTok sensation with your return home content regarding terramation and human composting. So please welcome to the show and tell us how where you've been and how you got here today.
Yeah, so my name is Bree Smith. I have been a licensed funeral director and embalmer for almost 15 years, and I am started at Return Home. I was the first funeral director on staff here. And for my part, I built the systems by which we run now. So, how we meet with families, a lot of the verbiage and how we talk about it. And with social media comes a lot of marketing. So just helping get our name out there over the last several years. And right now I work as a funeral director and the office manager. So I'm just making sure the ship runs the way it's meant to.
I mean, education has been really the platform using social media. And this is a really taboo topic. I mean, we're not just talking about dying, but we're talking about the step-by-step process in creating this terramation. And terramation, for those that don't know, it's not cremation, it's not aquamation, it's using the earth and the components of the earth for decomposition. So I'm going to let you kind of educate us more about terramation and what was it about social media that you felt compelled to use that as your platform?
Yeah, so great questions. Terramation is the gentle transformation of human remains into compost. In this case, we call it terramation because our system is specific to the gentle part, where people are placed in a vessel with straw, alfalfa, and sawdust, and they're kind of cozy between two layers, and ultimately the body breaks down over the course of 30 to 60 days in that vessel and becomes one with the organic material around them. We monitor the airflow and the temperature 24/7. We're ensuring that the moisture within is correct to make sure that every individual's terramation is moving along the way it should be, because everybody terramates a little differently. And I think the big draw to social media for us was that when I started our TikTok, we were at the end of COVID. And so my typical community outreach as a funeral professional might be to go to a nursing home and give out flowers, or do presentations in person, and we were still in a place where this would have been September 2021 is when I started the TikTok. We opened in June of 2021 to serve families, and so I had been working in the space since February of that year, getting everything ready for that June opening, and there was no other way for us to get out into the world except digitally. And so we just did that. And I started curating and producing videos alongside of the day-to-day duties. And they took off, I think, because of the content, because of where we are, what we're doing, this, new thing. And during COVID, I think people were confronting their mortality more than they have probably their entire life, unless they went through, another situation that for a millennial like me, maybe would have been 9/11 or something to that effect. But this was a time and space that was unique amongst many generations, where all of us combined at once thought about our mortality. And I think that's partly why they did so well, was because everybody was in that headspace at the time.
And I mean, you made a comparison to 9/11. So 9/11 was just a shocker, right? There was no preparation. It was just here and gone. With this, with COVID, though, there was like a process, a dying process. I mean, the fact that someone got sick and then went into the hospital, and then there were either days, weeks, or months where there was an uncertainty. And when they did pass, the question was, now what?
Right.
That final disposition,
Yeah.
for people that don't know, the final disposition, the way you want your body to be
Handled.
handled,
Yeah.
right? Placed. Um, in and I know that embalming's got a very long history, as well. But there's embalming and cremation. We've slightly touched on aquamation, which we're not going to go there. With the terramation, that seems like, next to green burial, which I'm going to ask you to define, seems almost the most natural place to go.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely passive. It's passive and gentle, and your body does what it would do in nature if nature were optimized to have you break down, essentially. So we are, yeah, advancing decomposition inside of the vessel. They're hooked up to HVAC, so there's no odor in the facility, and actually families visit really frequently to see their loved one. So it is similar to a burial in a way. It's just kind of a temporary burial, because at the end of the process, instead of ashes with a cremation, the family is returned beautiful, life-giving compost that they can, make memorial gardens or plant trees, and you really see that transfer of vitality take place. So it's like a burial, but in cemetery, but we call it like our temporary mausoleum.
So, Bree, can you educate us in the difference between a green burial and then terramation?
Yeah, absolutely. So a green burial is going to be what I consider to be nature's first ever interment, right? This is a person's body shrouded and placed inside of a grave space with no outer burial container or liner, no casket, and often adorned with flowers and other foliage to decorate and make the person's space beautiful. And then it is a burial where ground is placed then on top of the person. These are typically unmaintained as well. So green burial is going to come alongside of a more wild environment than you might find at like a cemetery, where people are buried in outer burial containers that hold up the earth when heavy things drive over them. In this case, you have, maybe pitting and local flora growing in the area. And, it's going to be the most natural placement into the earth possible. Terramation is, we're in a warehouse. We are in a housed environment. These are individual vessels that are, again, made and optimized to advance decomposition. And so inside of that vessel is an entire, biome of the body is working through. The alfalfa has nitrogen and oxygen's constantly being pulled through, and all of that carbon is being sequestered and being held in the space. So ultimately, we're talking about an outdoor direct to earth disposition versus a process by which you undergo a transformation and come out the other side as something that can be returned to the family. So it's a really interesting mix between burial and cremation, as far as just the tangibility of the, what happens at the end. So yeah, the green burial is like, it was my preference before I started here at Return Home. I think it's the most, beautiful way to go back to earth now, second to being able to take your people with you and enrich the earth and see that transfer of vitality take place.
And just to build out for people's understanding, when you do a green burial, you usually have to go to a specific location, right? There's the states, and we could talk about the laws, and governing some of these green options, but there's very designated locations. Unless, I know I live in the state of Pennsylvania. if I lived on a homestead with X amount of acres, I could potentially bury my loved ones here, but then I'm very regulated by it. Versus terramation, which is where that I actually am receiving back several pounds of basically human, I mean, what do you call the remains? The actual remains?
We call them teramated remains.
Okay, with respect,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
I got corrected one time. Oh, I got my hand slapped because I said mulching, human mulch, and someone like who's very passionate about green burials, she kind of corrected me to say you're really not mulching someone. You're really allowing, even knowing that end might actually it kind of looks like mulch, doesn't it though?
It does. Yeah, it's like a really fine beauty bar. I actually have some. Do you want to see it?
Oh yeah, that is be super
I
cool.
came
There you
prepared.
go. She's got her jar.
So this was not a human. This was a pig once, but
Oh,
that's exactly what it looks like.
I mean, it really does. It just looks like something I would put in my front garden.
It's beautiful. It's fine
And the
texture,
smell?
no smell. When it's hydrated and there's like moisture to it, it might smell like petrichor, like the smell after it rains. But there's absolutely no like odor, if you will. There's no, you would never know that those were the remains of something that was a living being once.
And I mean, for me, it is people are looking for options. They are looking for ways to memorialize the life that they've lived.
Hmm.
Um, Cremation certainly is the most well known. And people do like that a portability, right? That, I'm giving you my loved one and you're giving me a urn or something. And I guess the difference is ashes versus this, can I use the word compost? I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
okay.
that's
All
what
right. I just want to make sure.
compost. Yeah,
This compost, and that I can continue. So how many pounds per person? Like,
yeah.
how do you make that determination?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we put people into the vessel at about a 3-to-1 ratio of the straw alfalfa and sawdust to their body weight. I would say the average person who leaves here generates about 250 pounds of soil. That ends up being roughly a cubic yard. So for those of you who do garden, you would know that sizing probably pretty easily. But yeah, it's a great deal of organic material, and that's how we've optimized our services. I can't speak for everybody, but that's what our service generates. It's about 250 pounds. Now, if the person was a lot smaller or a lot larger, you're looking at larger quantities, and because of the nature of adding more organics. But ultimately, yeah, that's the amount. And about 60% of our families take that full amount home with them.
Wow.
And then they have the option. We have an authorization that dictates, what we're doing with the remains. Oftentimes they're divided, or families will live in like a condo and they only want maybe an urn-sized equivalent portion. And so we give them that option. And then anything that they don't take, Return Home owns an 8-acre greenbelt location about 10 minutes north of our facility. It's off of a beautiful hiking trail, and people's remains can be scattered on this property. And then we give the family the hiking trail coordinates and information so that they can go see where their loved one is contributing to the local flora and fauna and everything.
I mean, I just got the chills. I can just imagine that property has some magical experiences for people as they walk through, and just knowing that their loved ones are there and to be able to have that experience.
There's a beautiful energy on the property. And in fact, my aunt, my great aunt is there. So it's something that, I am behind it, and I've been here since the beginning. So I really think it's pretty great. And, that whole mentality, but at the same time, my family chose it for their person, and I was able to care for her that way. And it felt good and it felt right. And placing her there felt good. And so now when I visit there, it's like this beautiful place for me too. Like I'm part of those families who get to experience, and the property itself, we can't let the families be on because it is a green belt, which means we don't have pavers. There's no walking path. It's unmanned, and it's can't be tamed truly. Like it's a ferny and old growth trees and beautiful. But even just walking the trail below, we've erected a bench in memoriam. And when you stand at that bench and look up the hill, you're seeing that area. And it's so beautiful.
It is wonderful. Now, not every state has this option. And before I jump into more of the laws, which I do like talking about compliance and how that comes about, but the one burning question I have is, so what happens to the decomposition with someone who's had chemotherapy, radiation? Like, can you talk a little bit about the biochemical
Yeah.
components, the chemistry of that as well?
Yeah, well, they're doing studies still because really this is such a new science. Composting is not new at all. And even composting animals, that's where this all started. It's called mortality composting. So I know you'll want to know that because you'll want to dig deeper. Mortality composting, you can look it up on YouTube. Our composting PhD on our staff is called John Paul, and he does just an amazing job of explaining composting. What's new is the additives that human beings put into their body versus what goes into like maybe chickens or pigs or whatever the mortality composters are composting. So they're still doing studies. We are have to hit certain thresholds. It's 131 degrees for no less than 72 hours, and with that comes the inert pathogens. Basically at that temperature for that amount of time, we're making anything that could have been inside of the vessel neutral, and it ends up with a pH of about 7, which is pretty
Oh,
miraculous and
right.
amazing.
Yeah.
But we're pretty confident that the radiation goes away. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention that Cornell University does studies on these types of things, and so I would just keep up to date with those because that's where we get our information. And lately, I haven't seen anything published saying that things still exist forever. Most things have a half-life. So we're pretty well clear. But definitely, this with this service comes, don't maybe if especially if your person was undergoing heavy radiation or chemotherapy or taking just a lot of meds, I would reconsider before planting with food and then eating the food maybe. But that's like the
What
max.
you're using the mulch for is like
Yeah,
giving
yeah,
out food in your
maybe.
vegetable garden.
But it's still going to bring life and vitality. So,
Okay.
that's where I like to put it because I'm not that deep as a scientist into like, does it affect it? And will we find something out one day? I'm going to say that keep up with Cornell's research because they're the ones doing the real, nitty gritty studies on those types of things.
No, it's interesting. I mean, as you were talking, I was thinking like, do you, after 90 days, do you test for radioactivity, right? I mean, is that something that needs to be done? I mean,
Radiation has a pretty, like usually 90 days is like a pretty long half-life for something
okay.
that has, so we don't think that it's a problem. John Paul has done tests. We know that like the state requires us to test for a bunch of different things. So we're
On
pretty
each vessel? On each vessel or it's a
with like
sample?
a certain amount. So, however many X you take in, you have to do X percentage basically.
So let's step into this regulatory
Yeah.
place. I mean, do you find the funeral industry is heavily under scrutiny, right? The FTC, their pricing, like
Mhm.
you guys have been pretty heavily regulated. So adding this new service, and you're in Washington State.
Washington. Yep.
So how many states right now are offering terramation legally?
13.
Okay. And then of the 13 states, and I'm not going to ask you to name them, but of the 13 states, how many more are coming online, like put their application in for?
I would say many. There are states just all over. In fact, I just saw yesterday that New Jersey is considering it. There are just states popping up all the time. So I don't actually know, but definitely more than a hefty handful are considering legislation. So it's very much talked about, and it's really usually about the people in that area coming together and saying this is something we want. It's very consumer driven, I would say. And less driven by like industry professionals. They know about it. Most of them, at least, are aware that it exists. But I would say it's very consumer driven as far as like which states are starting to talk about it, are states that those people want that option.
I mean, we have to call the elephant in the room, which is more people are on their dying, and the way the places we can place them are becoming more limited, right? I mean, so either cremation has been the solution for direct burial, for burial, and yet there's, from an energy standpoint, I know that there's been some conversation about a green burial. Yes, you look for the plot and the location, and it doesn't necessarily require so much energy, just land. Cremation requires, we could talk about talk about the machines that are involved, and yet if you look at the amount of energy for a cremation versus terramation, because you're looking at a large warehouse, so there's energy in buildings, and so a green footprint, if we're going to use that term, what studies have been done, or a comparison from an energy standpoint, sustainability standpoint, cremation versus terramation?
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty staggering actually going from working from a traditional funeral home and just seeing all the inputs, outputs as well, but it's really like suppliers. It's like the outer burial containers and the caskets and just the extras that go into it. With cremation specifically, you can still be embalmed, you can still have a casket. So there are people who are embalmed and put in a casket, and then that whole casket's cremated. Um, Not to say that that's wasteful. It's what the family wants, and
Yes.
and so for me it's all about choice. But I do think that between burial and cremation there's not a choice that aligns with people who devoted their life to sustainability and to bettering the earth and leaving it better as you found it. And I find too, younger generations are very much of that mentality. We have taken the reins and said, we need to take care of this planet. And I'm proud to be part of that generation. And I think it goes from X to millennial. I think there's people in between who are really, really passionate about, what they're leaving behind, and they're composting at home, and they're using bamboo toilet paper, and they're making these major changes. And so for them to not have an option that aligns with their values in life is, to me, that's the part where I say this is a third option, or a fourth if you count aquamation, but an option where really we're using a limited amount of materials and reusing our vessels, and the space, we just don't have that many inputs. It's really just the organics and like some water. We do use a little bit of water because it has to be at about 50% moisture. But I mean, that's it. There's, the inputs are just so much less. And so I think that's the part where I feel like it's a wonderful alternative, because it's not anything like the other two, really. It's its own thing, and it's for people who feel this way. And, maybe at first we thought it would be a certain type of person. We're in the greater Seattle area. We maybe envisioned they drive a Subaru and they wear Birkenstocks, and those are our people, upper middle class Seattleites, what have you. We've learned that a lot more people are connect to the soil and the dirt more than you think. It's there's no class, no creed, no color, no religion. There's nothing that could possibly ever dictate who's going to choose this service, because it's for people who dig their hands into the dirt and love that feeling. And that's everybody. That's just anybody who has gotten the capability of doing that throughout their life. That's who relates to the service. And that's beautiful, because if they do garden in any way whatsoever, they will see new growth come from the remains once they've been placed. It's if you ever get to visit Seattle, you'll see our facilities, and we've got pig dirt and everything, and everything's just big and green and beautiful and happy. And it's because energy is never, finished. It's displaced. It's moved to a different thing. And in this case, you're moving a lot of energy into these remains that enrich people's soul when they get to place them in places that they live.
I mean, you used a lot of words that just sum up mindfulness, soulfulness, um, meaningfulness, right? And I think of the process direct cremation, right? I mean, and that again, choice, right? Economics. Someone could have a direct cremation for $1,200, and it's kind of like drive-through cremation, right? And the cost of a retort, I don't even know these days, right? The retorts and the amount of energy it uses, but it's quick, it's fast turnaround, it's kind of in out. Here's Uncle Joe's ashes, and be on your way. Where this one really is that that 90-day, 60 to 90-day, I'm sorry, you said 30, 60.
So the first phase is 30 to 60 days, and then
Okay.
the second phase is a solid 30 days. So we say 60 to 90 total.
But it also allows for the grieving process.
100%.
I mean, I can just see the difference between, I said, that drive-through cremation
Mhm.
choice versus this very mindful process, which is going to allow for that visitation. I could just see the symbolism
Well, it can
of
be so
letting go.
similar to what people are used to, too, because essentially it is a bit of an open casket when we have someone laying on their bed of organics and the family comes to see them. They're just not embalmed. And, so we can make it a little bit familiar and something that they've seen before. But I think what makes the service so special, really, for the people who choose it is the research that you do, because most people aren't researching a cremation, Nikki. They're not. They're not looking into what it means to be cremated. They're just doing it because that's what they do, and that's the default, and that's the phone number that they called. So, the people who choose this service, there's a learning curve to the whole thing. And in the beginning, I mean, oh my gosh, being the funeral director, doing this by myself for the first several months, like that, you have to learn new language. You have to learn how to guide a family through something you've never even been through. So you have to think about what's going to happen and then try to make it make sense for them to the best of your ability. Somehow we did it. But I mean, the people who choose it know us through our socials usually. This one family comes to mind all the time. They were from Georgia, and she trusted her son with my care. And she trusted, return home, but specifically she was like, I feel like I know you through TikTok. Like, I just know your heart, I know your spirit, and I know you're going to take really good care of my son. I get a little worked up, sorry.
Oh, I just got that. Yeah.
But he came into my care and I was like, do you
Wait,
want?
they shipped him from Georgia to
Yep,
across the country because they were that committed.
they were.
And
Yep.
then they came, and then after the process, then they went back to pick up the remains.
So we ship home. So
And
the same way people are sent to us in an air tray or a combo unit, we send people home in an air tray, essentially.
wow, let's talk cost,
Yeah,
right? Let's talk cost. So where use your and again, you're in Seattle, so
right.
metropolitan city, so would be aware,
Yes, yes.
right? So, but you are one of the first ones as well.
Yeah, yeah. We were the second facility open for like the people could, visit basically. And we're the only one where people can come in like it's a cemetery. You can pretty much visit anytime. Um, our cost is $5,450, and that includes everything, including a death certificate, all state taxes and fees, the transportation within 75 miles, the terramation itself, and packaging at the end to go home. It does not include us like delivering the person or shipping the person. That is an additional fee. But everything that someone might need for a terramation in the state of Washington within 75 miles is included in that fee.
So we talked about pricing, but does size matter?
Yeah, yeah. In this case, we do have limitations because everything's taking place in vessel. And so we think that our threshold is about 500 pounds. Anybody over that, we would recommend for cremation because we don't have oversized vessels. But it is something that we talk about a lot. And, as we expand and continue to grow, that might be a change that we make is having a couple oversized vessels. But for right now, our limit is about 500 pounds.
Fascinating. No, I mean, I think people just want to be able to consider. Oh, here's another one. So, what happens to, like, my husband had a knee replacement, pacemakers,
Yeah.
artificial limbs. Do you have to sift through all that once, and is that part of the processing? If you
Yeah,
know.
so at first we thought we needed to take pacemakers out because that's the industry standard for cremation is pacemakers are removed before the cremation takes place. We've since learned we don't have to do that. So we actually just leave all medical devices in unless it's like, there's IVs and things like that. We'll take those types of items out, but I'm talking about like implants. We just leave them in because the terramation takes place around them. And by the end of the process, that 30 to 60 days in vessel, we go to a screening, which is very similar to after cremation, where we actually go through the contents of the vessel
Like a
and
sister.
a sifter. Yep, you
Yeah.
got it. Literally, exactly. Except for it's manned. You've got a guy who's, making sure nothing inorganic in the body goes through. It's a mechanized breakdown where the bone and the compost surrounding the bone all go through this mechanism, and then they come out the other side completely uniform. And that's another state standard for both cremation and natural organic reduction is there can be no identifiable bone and it has to be completely uniform with the remains around it. So we've worked out our system is completely, put together by the team up in Abbotsford, BC, and they put together a beautiful system that makes it so that uniform remains that you saw earlier is what families will receive at the end.
Oh, you said BC, so you mean British Columbia,
Yes,
Canada.
yep, British
Okay.
Columbia. You got it.
Us from the East Coast, we're not.
I guess, yeah, I need to, yeah, make it clear. Yep, yep, yep.
I mean, so this technology is being used. What other countries are really embracing and becoming those forerunners on this?
Ooh, I'm so glad you asked that question. New Zealand recently has been in talks, and I actually know the people who are starting like the facilities and the testing over there. Germany is already in process. So Germany is there's Meine Erde, which is out of Germany, and they have a team over there. We know that the UK is starting to push. There's a group out of Wales that have come together that are pushing for it to be legalized there. So there's a lot of movement. I think for right now, those are the ones that really stick out as this is happening. Either they already have a facility like in Germany or they're really, really actively pushing for legislation. But yeah, I mean, that's of all the things of this whole experience, how far we've reached has been the
In a
most.
very short period of time.
Oh my gosh, it's like so overwhelming. And we get inquiries daily, like multiple inquiries a day being like, I love what you do. How can I get involved? And so, we're limited staff. We're like a family owned funeral home. So like,
Right.
we don't have jobs readily available, but we just tell them like, if you want to get involved, get it passed in legislation where you live. And a lot of people have gotten behind that and done it. And it's just been amazing. So
That is awesome. No, I mean, first step, right, is you need to be a funeral director. So I think that's step number one in order to even step into this industry and understand. Do you find that that terramation is, from a regulatory standpoint, compared to cremation, similar guidelines, or they're going to be more heavily regulated?
yeah, it depends on the state. Every state is so, so different as far as their laws and rules behind, funeral service, cemeteries, things like that. In this case, Washington state very much did put in line the natural organic reduction or the terramation law alongside of cremation. So all of the rules are very similar, if not completely the same. And they didn't have to make a ton of changes to the law to help it work for us. We are that hands-on white glove experience. So in New York, for instance, we would probably not open a facility because it is the funeral homes and the cemeteries are separate and they're regulated in a different way, and cemeteries are nonprofits. And that wouldn't give us the ability to have people come into our care and then like physically be with them to help them through the process, or the family physically be there. So it creates kind of a delineation for us. So there are definitely states that I would say are more like return home friendly. And then we're going to kind of see as time goes on, which states require which things from us. But a lot of them are taking the rules from Washington and using a similar template.
That's awesome. Well, listen, can you give us some, if people are interested in this, but they don't live in your state, we know that it can be shipped and in your care. So that is certainly an option I want to be able to, for people to be aware of. But if there is a consumer, a listener out there that is interested in learning more about this, what are some questions they can ask to legitimize the company, like, and what could potentially be a red flag? And the reason I'm saying is because some funeral services have been in the news
Yeah.
for yeah
It's
for
good to
some
vet your funeral home.
yeah
Yeah.
yeah. So what are
Um,
some good questions to ask, and what are like red flags people should be aware of?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with red flags. I think the biggest red flag is if they won't let you see the space. Like if there's no, absolutely hard line of you walk in and you say, "Can I just kind of like observe or see how this works?" And they give you like a hard no. A lot of places will do tours, which I think is a really good choice. I think it's good to get people in because if you don't clear up what's in the person's head, they can think of the worst possible thing and apply it, and they won't know different because you didn't show them differently. So I think, that, or just like a big push, like pushing huge discounts and things. Like we're all startups. Discounts, if that's happening, I'm not I'm not sure about why. And yeah, I don't know. That to me is a little sus. But then, questions to ask. I would say, in general, like I want to know what this looks like, and I want you to kind of break it down for me step by step, like what's going to happen in my loved one's body. And that's if you care, you know what I mean? So I think a lot like that because I'm a funeral professional. So I'm thinking about how people's bodies are treated after death, even though they're not there anymore. How is that body being handled and treated? I would suss out whether or not they have an answering service. Return Home is really proud of the fact that we don't have an answering service, and our calls go to staff that work here because it means that we're giving people accurate information and we're available 24/7. There's the aspect of visitation and like, can I see my loved one before the termination takes place? Can I see them during and come visit their vessel? Most of these are coming from my point of view. So I don't know the best questions for the layman to ask, but I would definitely watch for things like a lack of transparency.
These are great questions. Well, listen, this has been an incredibly informative and for some people, probably eye-opening conversation. Is there a national website where people can, find out if their state offers this service?
Yeah. So actually on Return Home, it's returnhome.com/ I'd rather be compost. We have a constant, like a map, and it's updated constantly with who's passed legislation. But there's a couple places out there, Funeral Consumer Alliance. We talked about earlier Green Burial, they don't really share as much, but sometimes they'll talk about, what's happening in legislation. But I would say, mostly your funeral directors association in the state that you live will have a good amount of information. And so if this is something that you really want to push, you can go to Return Home / I'd rather be compost, and you can download a legislation letter and send it to your local representative. And if you just want a Q&A and figure stuff out, you can call, us here at Return Home. You can call your local funeral directors association. You can call your local funeral and cemetery board. If applicable, but usually there's someone who's over watching licensing and things like that. You can reach out to Department of Licensing. So there's really a lot of non-biased places that you can reach out to get more information. And I'm just straight up biased, and I'm going to say go to Return Home socials, because on Instagram, on TikTok, as Nikki very kindly validated, we put a lot of information out there and try to help inform people to know that there's other options.
And with that, thank you so much for joining, and we'll end here. Have a great one.
Thank you. It was so nice to join you.
Thank you for listening to the Digital Legacy Podcast, where we talk about death and dying in the digital age. I hope this conversation inspired you to take control and plan for the inevitable to protect yourself and those you leave behind. Don't forget to subscribe to our newsletter at digitallegacypodcast.com. Remember, life is full of surprises. What happens after you die shouldn't be. So keep your passwords safe and your playbook up to date.